On a rainy afternoon in Los Angeles, Johnny Depp was stepping out of his favorite cafe, trying to keep a low profile beneath his signature hat and sunglasses. The bustling city seemed oblivious to the girl sitting quietly on the sidewalk nearby, clutching a tattered cardboard sign. She couldn't have been older than 18, her face pale, her clothes damp and worn. Most people passed her without a second glance, but something about her caught Johnny's eye. Was it the way her hands trembled? Or the unmistakable spark of determination in her gaze, even in such desperate circumstances? As Johnny approached, the girl timidly held out her sign. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, it read, "Just need a chance. Please help." Intrigued, he knelt to ask her name. But before she could answer, he noticed something that made him pause, a small, worn notebook peeking out from her belongings. On its cover, a single word was etched in careful lettering. What Johnny discovered in that moment would change not only her life, but his as well. Little did anyone know, this meeting was about to spark a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Johnny gently picked up the notebook, glancing at the girl to see if she objected. She hesitated but gave a small nod, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. The cover was worn and smudged, but the word etched on it, "Dreams," was still clear. Inside, pages were filled with sketches, notes, and what looked like heartfelt stories. Some drawings were rough, others intricate, but all of them carried a depth that stopped Johnny in his tracks. This wasn't just a random notebook. It was her world, her voice. He turned to the girl, who introduced herself as Emily. She spoke quietly, explaining how she'd been living on the streets for months after leaving a troubled home. Art and storytelling, she said, were the only things that kept her going. Her dream was to become an illustrator, but without money, support, or even a roof over her head, it felt impossible. Johnny listened intently, piecing together her struggle. Her talent was undeniable, but there was something else, too, an unshakable determination in her words that reminded him of his own fight to make it in Hollywood. Still, a question lingered in his mind. Why had her life led to this point? And what could he do to help? Yes, Emily spoke. Her voice trembled with both exhaustion and resolve. She shared bits and pieces of her journey, how her stepfather's anger often left her hiding in her room, sketching to escape the chaos. How one night she decided to run away, thinking life on the streets couldn't possibly be worse. But she quickly learned that survival out here was its own kind of nightmare. Johnny couldn't ignore the weight of her words, but something about Emily's story didn't add up. She was smart, driven, and resourceful, so why had no one stepped in to help her before? When he asked, Emily looked down, clutching her notebook tighter. "People don't really see you when you're out here," she said softly. "They look through you like you don't exist." It was a truth Johnny had seen before, even in his own career. But there was something else bothering him, something Emily wasn't saying. As he gently probed, her walls began to crack. She revealed that someone had once promised to help her, a local gallery owner who had shown interest in her work. But when she showed up to meet him, everything went wrong. Her voice faltered, her gaze darting nervously. Clearly, there was more to this story. Johnny knew he needed to dig deeper. The question was how. But she trusted enough to let him in. Johnny's mind raced as Emily's words lingered in the air. There was a heaviness in her silence, an unspoken pain she seemed too afraid to voice. He didn't press her further, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened with the gallery owner was more than just a missed opportunity. For now, he decided to focus on what he could see clearly, her talent, her determination, and the fact that she desperately needed someone in her corner. The next day, Johnny returned to the cafe with a plan. He'd called a few contacts who might be able to help, a friend who owned a small art studio, a charity worker who specialized in assisting homeless youth. But when he arrived, Emily was nowhere to be found. Her usual spot on the sidewalk was empty, her belongings gone. A knot formed in his stomach. He asked around, but no one seemed to have noticed her leave. Hours turned into days, and Johnny began to worry he might never see her again. Then, one evening, as he walked through a quieter part of the city, he spotted her familiar figure in an alleyway. She was huddled against the wall, clutching her notebook like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When she saw him, her face lit up for a moment before the fear returned to her eyes. "Emily, what's going on?" Johnny asked gently, kneeling beside her. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to bother you," she said. "But he found me." Johnny's heart sank. That he she was talking about could only mean one thing, the gallery owner she had been so hesitant to talk about. And now, it seemed, he wasn't done with her. Johnny could feel the tension in the air as Emily clutched her notebook tighter. Whatever had happened between her and that man, it was clear that she wasn't safe. And for the first time, Johnny realized that helping her might mean more than just giving her a chance to chase her dreams. It might mean protecting her from a danger she hadn't fully escaped. Johnny's heart pounded as Emily's words sank in. He wanted to ask more, but the fear in her eyes held him back. Instead, he stayed close, his presence a quiet reassurance. "You're not alone in this," he said firmly. Emily nodded, but it was clear her mind was elsewhere, tangled in whatever danger had found her. Later that night, Johnny made a few discreet calls to ensure Emily's immediate safety, arranging for her to stay in a secure location through one of his trusted contacts. Reluctantly, she agreed, but before leaving, she handed him her notebook. "If anything happens, don't let this get lost," she whispered. Her words chilled him, as though she already knew the storm wasn't over. The next day, while flipping through the notebook, Johnny found something that stopped him cold. Among the sketches and stories, there were pages of frantic handwriting, almost like journal entries. One described an encounter where the gallery owner had coerced her into signing something, papers she hadn't fully understood at the time. The entry ended with a chilling line. "Asterisk, if I don't agree, he said he'd ruin me." Asterisk. Johnny's instincts told him this wasn't just about a missed opportunity or broken promise. Someone had used Emily's vulnerability to exploit her talent, and now they weren't letting go. Just as he started piecing it together, Johnny received a call. It was the contact who had arranged Emily's safe space. "Johnny, we've got a problem," the voice on the other end said. "Emily's gone. She slipped out early this morning and left no trace." Johnny's grip tightened on the phone as the news sank in. Emily was gone. A wave of frustration and worry washed over him. Why had she run? Where could she have gone? Determined not to give up, he grabbed the notebook and scoured the pages again, hoping for a clue. That's when he noticed something he'd missed before. A small sketch tucked in the corner of a page showed a street mural, one Johnny vaguely recognized. It wasn't far from where he'd last seen her. He rushed to the location, scanning the area until his eyes landed on her. Emily was sitting on the curb, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the mural. When she saw him, her face crumpled and she whispered, "I didn't want to bring you into this." Johnny sat beside her, waiting until she was ready to speak. She finally confessed the truth. The gallery owner had forged her signature on documents, claiming ownership of her artwork. It threatened to destroy her reputation if she exposed him. "I thought running was my only option," she said, tears streaming down her face. Johnny reassured her that running wasn't the answer. He'd seen enough of the entertainment world to know how to fight back. With her permission, he contacted his legal team, who immediately launched an investigation. Days later, the gallery owner was confronted with undeniable evidence of his wrongdoing. Not only was Emily's work returned to her, but the man faced public scrutiny and legal consequences for exploiting young artists. Just as Emily began to feel like her nightmare was over, Johnny revealed a surprise. He'd shown her notebook to a close friend, an influential producer in the art world. They were captivated by her talent and offered to feature her work in an upcoming showcase. Emily's eyes widened with disbelief as she realized her dream wasn't just alive, it was closer than ever. As the day of the showcase arrived, Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding. But as she stepped forward to greet the applause, she spotted someone in the crowd. Her stepfather, standing in the back, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt strength. Emily had reclaimed her voice, and no one could take it from her again. The applause was deafening, and for a moment, Emily stood frozen, overwhelmed by the love and validation she'd never thought she'd experience. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, letting the warmth of the moment wash over her. The gallery was filled with people admiring her work, and for the first time she felt truly seen, not as a girl struggling to survive, but as an artist with a story worth telling. After the showcase, Johnny found her in the corner, smiling as she watched people marvel at her art. "You did it," he said, handing her a glass of sparkling water. She laughed softly. "No," she replied. "We did it." The success of the event brought Emily opportunities she never imagined. She was offered a chance to collaborate with other artists, and even began teaching a class for youth who shared her passion. The fear that once consumed her faded into determination, replaced by a sense of purpose. As for Johnny, he remained in her corner, quietly supporting her journey. "You've got the rest from here," he told her one day with a smile. And she did. Emily's story was no longer about survival. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of second chances.